What's up, guys? I'm Lucas, and welcome to Terracotta Aquarium. Today, I want to share with you guys some tips and tricks for starting up an aquarium and for maintaining a successful one. So, just a little disclaimer before we get started. I am a beginner. I've been doing this for maybe a year and a half, and in that time, I've set up 4 successful tanks, and I plan on doing more. So, I'm going to share with you guys the methods that have been working for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't better methods or a different method that's going to work for you. So first, let's talk about our filtration. Obviously, I have a filter right here on this tank, but I've also got really well-established substrate layer. And the substrate and the filter are going to work together to do the overall filtration of your aquarium. When I set up a substrate in a new tank, I generally will do 3 separate layers. In this tank, you can see that I've got a layer of gravel at the bottom, and then a layer of aqua soil, and then a capping of sand at the top. This provides, at the bottom, a surface for beneficial bacteria to breed with lots of surface area in all of that gravel. It also provides a place for the water to be pushed through by the filter. The aqua soil provides a place for the plants to take root and get the nutrition that they need. And then the sand layer on top keeps all of the nutrients of the aqua soil sort of down embedded into the substrate and out of the water column. The filter also provides a good place for beneficial bacteria to build up. The filter media inside is where they're going to latch on and start growing. The filter also serves to push the water around your aquarium and does a really good job of making sure that there's surface agitation and oxygenation from the surface getting into your aquarium. So if we take a look inside of this hang on the back filter here, you can see I've got a series of sponges. This one contains a lot of just like small kind of porous rocks that have a great place for bacteria to build up on. And I've also added just a bunch of ceramic media into the back pockets here. And I actually took that media from this canister filter right here that is attached to this tank. And that can be a really good hack to start up an aquarium faster. If you have multiple aquariums, or if you have a friend who has an aquarium, or you can even go to the fish shop and ask if they have any pre-cycled media. If you add something like this to a new tank, then it's going to help you start a lot faster because you're already going to be moving your water across media that has quite a bit of beneficial bacteria built up in it. So you may have just heard me say cycling an aquarium, and you might have no idea what that means. Basically, cycling an aquarium is establishing the nitrogen cycle within your tank. And everything in here, from the fish, the plants, the substrate, the filter, they all play a huge role in that. Basically, the nitrogen cycle turns the ammonia produced by the fish in terms of their poop and that kind of thing into nitrites, which then beneficial bacteria in the filter, in the substrate, on the plants built up over time, that will turn nitrite into nitrate, which is the least harmful chemical to fish. Large amounts of ammonia and nitrites can cause problems with your fish. So establishing a strong nitrogen cycle in your aquarium is really important. Having a good filter and a good substrate system set up in your aquarium are going to help you have a stronger cycle overall and build up a system that is going to be stable, because that's what we're looking for when we're setting up an aquarium for success is stability. Hey guys, just a friendly reminder that if you've made it this far in the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. So a huge factor in maintaining a successful cycle in an aquarium are plants. As I said, ammonia gets processed into nitrite and then into nitrate. And the plants in your aquarium can use nitrates to grow, and they'll keep that level under control. It is totally possible to do an aquarium without plants. There's tons of people who do this super successfully, but you need more filtration to do that because you're relying entirely on your filter to do the cycling. And there may be some amount of that in the substrate as well in those types of aquariums. But I've found that if you have a ton of plants in your aquarium, they're going to be uptaking ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. There have been a lot of studies done on aquatic plants and the way that they uptake these chemicals, and there's a pretty clear consensus that plants actually prefer ammonia to either nitrite or nitrate. So if you have a ton of plants in your aquarium, then they're just going to grow based on everything that your fish are doing in all stages of the nitrogen cycle. And in fact, over filtering an aquarium can cause competition between your filter and the plants in your aquarium. You can almost think of your aquatic plants as a secondary filter. So if you are over filtering an aquarium and you have a ton of plants, your beneficial bacteria and the plants in your aquarium are both going to be competing for ammonia. Because the beneficial bacteria need that ammonia to be able to survive, to continue turning it into nitrite and then nitrate. And plants want that ammonia above everything else to be able to grow. So it's best to have both, because filters do a lot of things like oxygenating your water, making it move around, increasing the oxygenation of your substrate and the water overall. But plants are really that secondary powerhouse in your aquarium that are just going to, well, for one, bring a lot of beauty to it, but bring that level of stability that we're looking for. Because they're going to keep the ammonia level low, the nitrite level low, and the nitrate level low. And they'll help you find a balance where you can start doing less and less water changes over time, because they're going to be growing and using the chemical balance within the aquarium to continue growing. So that's my number one thing for starting up an aquarium, and especially for maintaining one over time, is having a good amount of plants. And I know a lot of people, when you're starting an aquarium, they don't have, you don't have a big budget to buy a million plants, and neither did I. The plants that you're seeing in here, these were all purchased over time, and they've grown a lot since setting up this tank. But when I first set this up, I would go maybe every other week to my local fish store and just buy one or two pots and test them out in the aquarium. And I think that's really important too with plants, because not all of the plants that you buy are really going to work in your aquarium. There's a lot of factors that go into it, like the different elements that are in your substrates, the pH of your water, and the natural elements that are in your water where you live locally. A lot of that is going to dictate the type of plants that are going to grow well in your aquarium. So experimenting is really important, or asking people locally at the local fish store what grows well in their aquariums. And when shopping for plants, I ask a lot of questions like, how long has this plant been here in the shop? Is it doing well? And don't buy plants that don't look like they're doing well in the water at your local fish store, because that's a pretty good indicator of whether or not they're going to grow well in your water. Because at the end of the day, you guys are starting, you and the fish store are starting with the same sort of baseline water. For example, in this tank here, I have a good amount of crushed coral in the substrate, and that is increasing the level of bicarbonates in my water quite a bit. And there are a few plants in here that grow super well using bicarbonates as a way to increase their mass. So the dwarf sage that's all in the front here, the sprigs of Vallisneria spiralis, those plants are just totally taking off. And I'm leaning into those plants and just letting them go wild, because I know it's really healthy for my aquarium. So plants are important, but it's also really important to find plants that are going to work for you. So some of the best plants for starting up an aquarium are going to be fast-growing plants, like stem plants, that kind of thing, because they'll use all of that stuff in your water, the ammonia, nitrites, nitrate, to just grow faster. And the same is true for floating plants like these. Floating plants just grow and grow and grow and just multiply super quickly. And they'll do a really good job of using any excess nutrients that are being produced as you establish your cycle to continue to grow. And a lot of people hate duckweed. You can see in this aquarium, ton of duckweed. Ultimately, I found that duckweed is just kind of going to get into everything regardless. So I just kind of embrace it. It could be worse. I could have like a really unhealthy aquarium. But duckweed multiplying rapidly is a great sign that you have a healthy aquarium. So I embrace it. But if you're going to buy floating plants at your local fish store, I recommend that you don't get too many, because before you know it, every week you're just going to be throwing away handfuls of floating plants, unless you have friends, family to give them to, or if your local fish store accepts floating plants, which mine does not, unfortunately. But floating plants, stem plants, any fast-growing plant is really going to help that startup phase of your aquarium. Another thing that I like to do for plants in most of my aquariums is to incorporate terrestrial plants. There's a lot of plants that'll just grow straight out of the top of your aquarium with their roots immersed below. And I think it can look really, really cool. Like, this is my Blackwater jungle tank, and this Monstera that I've got growing out of it has just completely taken off. There's a bunch of pothos back here as well, and a peace lily. Peace lily is probably doing the worst out of the three. I'm not totally sure why, but the Monstera is crazy. It's got a whole root system that goes all the way down the tank and into the substrate. And the pothos is growing super well behind. But you can really think of terrestrial plants like this as that second or even tertiary filter, because the roots that they're sending down are just going to suck out all of the elements, trace elements, ammonia, nitrites, nitrate. They're just going to take all of that out of the water and just use it to grow. You can think of them really similarly to your aquatic plants within the aquarium, but almost on another level. And I find it really helpful whenever I set up a new aquarium to go buy like a little Monstera or take a cutting of some pothos and just sort of place it so that it can grow roots into the tank. And that's just another safety measure for you that can be a really cool aesthetic thing as well to help with that startup phase of the aquarium. And as things stabilize, you can take it out if you want, or just let it grow. It's sort of your own aesthetic choice. But it's been super helpful to me to make it so that I don't have to maintain the aquarium as much, do less water changes, that sort of thing. Like this tank, I haven't done a water change in this tank in probably 3 months, and the parameters are super stable. The cories have been breeding as well in here, which is a really good indication that you have a stable environment. If your fish are willing to breed, that means that they feel safe and the water quality is pristine. So, yeah, I highly recommend terrestrial plants. Here's a really great example of a terrestrial plant in water. This is my bonsai pond. And as you can see, the bonsai, this is a ficus ginseng bonsai, it's just growing straight out. It's putting a ton of roots into the water at this point. These branches are growing super well. And in this tank, the bonsai is the filter. And the cycle is complete. It took a little bit longer than it would using a traditional filter, that kind of thing. But the tank is thriving. I've got a ton of snails in here that are all doing super well. And I have a little bit of water movement that I'm just creating by using a tiny pump in the back here that's pushing water just straight out between the bonsai's, I want to say legs, more or less, but to sort of roots that are in the water. So you can do something like this, low budget, that's going to be super successful and stable if you add, a nice terrestrial plant like this. because it really does act as another level of filtration that's going to provide that stability that you're looking for. Okay, so you've got your substrate system set up, you've got your filtration, you've got a tank full of plants, and your tank is cycled at this point. Now you want to add some fish. My advice to you would be to add fish slowly. When I add fish to an aquarium, I think about the term bioload. And that term means basically the amount of fish that you're adding to the aquarium. You want to start small and gradually increase. If you add a ton of fish to your aquarium all at once, that can cause some problems. If you add a ton of fish to your aquarium all at once, the cycle that is already present in your aquarium might get overloaded. There might be a ton of ammonia produced by the fish, and there might not be enough beneficial bacteria or enough plants in your aquarium to keep up with the amount of ammonia that is being produced. If you add fish slowly, the plants will grow with the fish, and the amount of beneficial bacteria will also grow with the amount of waste being produced by the fish. So the cycle will kind of match the amount of ammonia that's being produced. It'll get used to that. Then you can add some more fish. The cycle will get used to that, add more fish, and so on. So you can slowly increase what the cycle and stability of your tank is capable of handling over time. You may see some people on YouTube just able to add like a ton of fish to their aquarium right away. And this is totally doable, but you really have to know what you're doing and you have to be prepared to do a lot of water changes. It's also very dependent on the size of tank you have and the amount of plants, etc., etc. But as a beginner, I highly advise you to start slow. I know it can be really tough when you're at the fish shop and you see all of these different fish that you want to get and you want them all in the tank now. But if you're not prepared to deal with that situation and have the experience to know what's going on in your tank, then things might go poorly for you. So after you add fish to an aquarium, it is really important that you test the water. And I use this. This is an API, Freshwater Master Test Kit. And this thing has helped me learn a ton about aquariums just by testing the water. If you use this as your cycle is going on, you can actually see over time the ammonia getting turned into nitrites and that getting turned into nitrate. So you can learn a lot just by testing your aquariums throughout that cycling process. And then once you add fish, you can do daily water testing to see how they are affecting your cycle. You might see a rise in ammonia after you add the fish, and this is totally natural. If you see that happen, you can just do a water change, add some beneficial bacteria, and keep monitoring. A lot of people, I think, they think that once their cycle is established, they are free to just go wild with fish. And this isn't necessarily true. There's a bit of an argument between cycling and fish in cycling on the internet and what's right and what's wrong. And I think that the reality is much more in the middle. You can establish a baseline cycle so that bacteria are ready to grow once your fish are put in, but there's still going to be a certain amount of cycling that happens whenever you add a bioload fish to an aquarium. And so it's important to be able to react to that. And a test kit like this is really going to help you be able to monitor what happens to your cycle after you add fish. Say, for example, you add a group of 6 cardinal tetras or something to your tank, and you don't test the water because you think the cycle is established, etc., and maybe you get a disease or something like that happen because your water parameters changed. Having a test kit like this is going to help you prevent that from happening. Whenever I add new fish to an aquarium, I do daily water testing until I see stable parameters again. I also, whenever I add fish, I add beneficial bacteria for the first week or so. So I use stability from Chem. And there are a lot of products like this. There's like API, Quick Start, that kind of thing. This is basically just beneficial bacteria in a bottle that when you add it to the aquarium, they're going to find places to start breeding, like in your filter media and in your substrate that has that nice layer at the bottom with all of the rocks and also all of the sand. Really, everything in your substrate is going to provide surface area for the beneficial bacteria to breed. And having the right amount of beneficial bacteria is going to help your cycle adjust to any new fish that you're adding. So when I add new fish to an aquarium, I generally will just add beneficial bacteria a little bit every day based on the size of the tank. There's generally directions on whatever product you use. I'll just add a little bit every day until I'm getting a really stable reading with my test kit. And I think this is where a lot of people in the hobby run into problems. And this is certainly where I ran into problems in the first aquarium that I set up. I think a lot of people believe that once their nitrogen cycle is complete, in whatever tank they have, whether it be a planted tank or not, they think, all right, I'm good to go. Add fish, and then they think that they're going to be fine from there because their cycle is established. When in reality, it's a lot more nuanced than that. The cycle is going to adjust. And the people that believe in fish in cycling, they believe this for good reason, because the cycle is going to change in terms of the amount of beneficial bacteria, the amount of chemicals that, the amount of ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate that your plants are uptaking. All of that is going to adjust whenever you add a new element to your ecosystem, because that's really what these tanks are, is a little ecosystem in a box. And I think it's important to stay on top of it. And once you get a tank like really well established, you can step back and do less water changes, which is what I've done with most of my tanks at this point, is they kind of just run themselves because I've set things up in a way that they can do so. But I highly recommend adding beneficial bacteria and using the test kits to just see what's going on in your aquarium whenever you add new fish, whenever you increase the bioload. And do so slowly so that you can adjust when you need to. If you're a beginner and you have a massive swing in ammonia or something, you might not have any idea what's going on. And it's going to be really disheartening if you lose fish or you feel like you've failed. Like, that's a big quit moment in the hobby. And I want to help people avoid that. All right, guys, that's the video for today. Those are my tips and tricks about starting up an aquarium in a way that can help you maintain it in the long term. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment below if I could have explained something better, or tell me what you learned. Tell me about your favorite aquarium and how it's going. But thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.